September 19, 1940. On a crowded Warsaw street, a Polish resistance fighter deliberately walked into a German street roundup. His name was Witold Pilecki, and he was about to become the only person in history known to have voluntarily been imprisoned in Auschwitz. His mission: infiltrate the camp, organize resistance, and document Nazi atrocities for the world to see. Pilecki wasn't just any resistance fighter. He was a cavalry officer, a family man, and one of the founders of the Polish secret army. When reports began emerging about a new concentration camp called Auschwitz, the resistance needed someone inside. Pilecki volunteered without hesitation, understanding he might never return. The first days in Auschwitz were beyond anything Pilecki had imagined. He received prisoner number 4859 and was thrown into the brutal reality of camp life. The systematic dehumanization began immediately. Striped uniform, shaved head, endless roll calls in all weather conditions. But Pilecki had an advantage. He was there by choice, with a mission that gave him purpose when others were breaking. His first task was survival. Auschwitz, in 1940, was still developing its extermination methods, but the death rate was already staggering. Prisoners died daily from beatings, starvation, and disease. Pilecki used his military training to maintain discipline, conserving energy, avoiding unnecessary attention, and slowly building connections with other prisoners. The resistance organization began small. Pilecki started with just 5 trusted men, creating what would become the ZOW, Military Organization Union. Their initial goals were basic: share food, protect each other from guards, and gather intelligence. But Pilecki had much grander plans. He understood that to survive Auschwitz, prisoners needed hope, and resistance provided that hope. By early 1941, Pilecki's network had grown to nearly 100 members. They operated with incredible sophistication, considering the circumstances. They had communication channels with the outside world, smuggled out reports, and even managed to get some prisoners transferred to less deadly camps. The organization was structured like a proper military unit, with cells, messengers, and dead drops. One of Pilecki's most remarkable achievements was his documentation of camp conditions. He secretly recorded everything: the daily death toll, the methods of torture, the construction of new crematoria, the arrival of transports. This information was smuggled out to Warsaw, then transmitted to the Polish government in exile in London. He was creating the first comprehensive record of the Holocaust as it happened. The risks were unimaginable. Discovery meant immediate execution, often after prolonged torture, to extract information about other resistance members. Pilecki watched as friends were hanged, shot, or worked to death. Yet he continued expanding his network, eventually reaching nearly 1,000 members across different camp sections. Pilecki's reports to the outside world became increasingly desperate throughout 1941. He documented the beginning of mass gassings, the construction of Birkenau's extermination facilities, and the systematic murder of Soviet POWs. His messages to Allied governments pleaded for action: bomb the rail lines, destroy the crematoria, anything to stop the slaughter. But the response from the Allies was disappointing. While they found the reports credible, they considered Auschwitz too far behind enemy lines for effective military action. The Polish government continued forwarding Pilecki's documentation, but the world seemed slow to comprehend the scale of the horror he was describing. Inside the camp, Pilecki's resistance achieved small but significant victories. They smuggled medicine to sick prisoners, warned of upcoming selections, and occasionally managed to sabotage equipment. Most importantly, they maintained human dignity in a place designed to destroy it. The very existence of an organized resistance gave prisoners something the Nazis couldn't take away: hope. By 1942, Auschwitz had evolved from a concentration camp to a full-scale extermination center. The transports grew larger, the killing methods more efficient. Pilecki watched in horror as the final solution unfolded around him. His reports now contained numbers that seemed impossible to believe. Thousands murdered daily, entire communities wiped out in hours. The resistance faced new challenges. The SS introduced kapos, prisoner supervisors who often proved more brutal than the guards themselves. Informants were everywhere, and trust became the most precious commodity in the camp. Yet Pilecki's organization adapted, developing better security protocols and expanding their intelligence gathering. As 1942 progressed, Pilecki began planning his most audacious move yet, a camp uprising coordinated with outside resistance forces. He believed that with proper timing and weapons, the prisoners could take control of Auschwitz and alert the world to the genocide happening within its fences. But to make this happen, he needed to escape and deliver his plan personally to resistance headquarters. The stage was set for one of the most daring escapes of World War II and a final attempt to shock the world into action against the Holocaust. By April 1943, Pilecki had spent nearly 3 years in Auschwitz, witnessing the camp's transformation into the epicenter of the Holocaust. His resistance network now numbered over 1,000 prisoners, but the situation was becoming increasingly desperate. The systematic murder of Jews had reached industrial scale, and Pilecki knew his reports to the outside world had failed to trigger the Allied response he'd hoped for. The escape plan was audacious in its simplicity. Pilecki and 2 companions would volunteer for night bakery duty, which provided access to the camp's perimeter. Using forged documents and stolen SS uniforms they'd accumulated through their network, they would simply walk out the main gate. The date was set for April 26, 1943, a moonless night that offered the best cover. The escape itself went surprisingly smoothly. Dressed as SS officers, the 3 men marched confidently past guards who barely glanced at their forged papers. Once outside, they melted into the Polish countryside, beginning a 150-kilometer journey to Warsaw. For the first time in 947 days, Pilecki was free, but he carried with him the weight of everything he'd witnessed. His arrival in Warsaw should have been triumphant, but reality proved different. The Polish Home Army leadership was shocked by Pilecki's detailed reports, not just by the scale of the atrocities, but by his assessment that over 2 million people had already been murdered at Auschwitz. Yet they rejected his plan for a camp uprising, considering it suicidal without substantial Allied support. Undeterred, Pilecki wrote his comprehensive Witold's Report, a 100-page document detailing the camp's organization, daily operations, and the unfolding genocide. This report would become one of the most important documents of World War II, providing the Allies with irrefutable evidence of the Holocaust while it was still happening. Yet the response remained frustratingly slow. Pilecki's warnings about the camp's expanding killing capacity were precise. He documented how Auschwitz-Birkenau could murder 8,000 people daily, how the crematoria operated around the clock, and how the SS had perfected their efficient brutality. His reports included exact numbers, names of perpetrators, and technical details of the gas chambers, information that could only come from an eyewitness. The Polish resistance leadership assigned Pilecki to other duties, but he never abandoned his Auschwitz comrades. He continued sending messages and supplies into the camp through underground channels. Meanwhile, his comprehensive report made its way to London, where it was studied by British intelligence and the Polish government in exile. In August 1943, Pilecki's worst fears were realized when he learned about the uprising in the Treblinka extermination camp. The prisoners there had proven that resistance was possible, even in the most hopeless circumstances. Pilecki saw this as validation of his own plans, but by then it was too late for a similar uprising at Auschwitz. As 1944 began, Pilecki joined the Warsaw Uprising, fighting bravely until the city's surrender. He then spent the rest of the war in German POW camps, still organizing resistance networks among captured soldiers. When the war ended, he returned to Poland, only to find his country now under Soviet occupation. Tragically, Pilecki's story doesn't end with Nazi defeat. In 1947, he was arrested by Poland's new communist secret police. They interrogated and tortured him for months, demanding information about his work with the Western-aligned Polish government in exile. Despite brutal treatment, he never betrayed his comrades. His show trial in 1948 was a communist propaganda spectacle. Charged with espionage and plotting against the state, Pilecki used his final statement not to plead for mercy, but to describe the differences between Nazi and communist oppression. He was executed on May 25, 1948, with his family only learning of his fate decades later. Pilecki's legacy was suppressed during the communist era, but since Poland's liberation in 1989, he has been recognized as a national hero. His Auschwitz reports remain essential Holocaust documentation, and his courage serves as a powerful example of resistance against overwhelming evil. What makes Pilecki's story so extraordinary isn't just his bravery in facing the Nazis, but his unwavering commitment to truth and human dignity in the face of two totalitarian systems. He proved that one person's courage can illuminate the darkest corners of history, even when the world seems determined to look away. His final report contained this poignant reflection: "I tried to live my life so that in the hour of my death I would rather feel joy than fear." In this, as in so much else, Witold Pilecki succeeded magnificently. What do you think drives someone to voluntarily enter hell for others? Share your reflections in the comments. If you want more stories of incredible courage from history's darkest hours, subscribe for our next video about Churchill's codebreakers at Bletchley Park.